take you through the big picture issues and introduce you to our schedule and the things that we're looking at. The next budget workshop will focus on general fund. The workshop after that will focus on utilities. The fourth workshop will be our bringing it all back together. Hopefully we're addressing and resolving all your issues at that point. And then if we need more, we'll get that direction from you guys, and we'll have a fifth or sixth if necessary. So as I stated before, workshop number one is generally, it's a presentation by staff. We'll kind of walk you through the big issues, answer any questions that you have, of course, and get you thinking about the considerations that you're going to have as we move through the budget cycle, at least as we see them now. So, and I would tell you that in terms of presentation tonight, you all have the handout in front of you. Dallas and I will be sharing the discussion. If it's a tough technical topic that requires financial insights, Dallas has asked me to handle those, and other way around. So I handle the fluff and the feel-good stuff, and then if it gets tough or technical.
Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. As we start off every budget workshop is just the timeline and where we are in the process. As you know, we start our budget process in January with the kickoff of our capital budgets. Between January and May, the department heads work to prepare their submittals, and they submit them to us usually in the first week in May. Then we meet with the elected officials to get your insight and your direction. As the manager said, this is our first budget workshop, so we're in the June area, and we've got a couple more budget workshops coming up. The big items that'll be affecting the commission is we have our second budget workshop scheduled for the 28th of June. As the manager mentioned, that's going to be on our governmental funds. And then after that, we do have on the July 10th meeting, the commission will be voting to set the preliminary fire assessment rate. On the July 24th meeting, the commission will be voting to set your preliminary millage rates. Both of those are the rates that set your ceilings. You can't go above those rates without re-noticing, and those are the rates that get sent out on your trim notices.
So in order to get everybody in the right mind frame, just to bring forward some of the accomplishments from the last few years that we, I guess, were able to accomplish through our budgeting process. I guess credit goes to this commission. Item number one is we've increased our general fund reserves to $658,000, and that's as the end of the last fiscal year in 2016, as of September the 30th. I like to say it started at zero, but Dallas tells me that it was $48. $64 in general fund reserves, somewhere around 2014. Somewhere around 2012. I should have left the technical information to him. But that's quite an accomplishment, in my opinion, that we've been able to set aside that much money. I would tell you that that's only half of what we think we need. If we want to maintain or achieve our goal of having 2 to 2.5 months of operating cash in reserves, then we need to get that somewhere north of 1.3 in the 1.3 to 1.4 million dollar range. We were directed a few years ago to diversify our revenues, that we were concerned with our with almost a singular reliance on one particular property owner in town as being the primary source of our revenues. And so the commission asked us to diversify our revenues. We have done that. We've had success. We have electric franchise fees. We've established a mosquito control fee, which doesn't bring tons of revenue in, but it is a step in the right direction in terms of identifying sources and allocating those funds to the service that is provided to folks. I'd say that as we move into the revenue projections for property values next year, and we'll see what's occurring, what's coming out of the property appraiser's office. It should shore up our resolve to diversify our incomes. We are again faced with heavy reliance on one property owner having a detrimental financial impact to the city of Newberry. We've successfully achieved increased funding for public services, for public safety in the fire department. We've made a number of strides towards enhancing our fire department, and I'm very pleased with that. We've increased funding for repair and replacement of our assets, infrastructure, water, wastewater, electric utility infrastructure, public works infrastructure, our facilities and vehicles over the last 3 or 4 years. We've developed equitable water and wastewater rates, and we've also developed water and wastewater rates that generate enough revenues to cover our expenses, which wasn't the case for a period of time prior to that. We've maintained competitive electric rates, and we've done that even with a particularly high wholesale power rate. I think that we have run lean in the electric department for 7 or 8 years. We'll continue to need to do that, but I'm very proud of the way that that we've been able to provide high reliability and a high level of service in the electric department as lean as we've been. And a reminder that in the current fiscal year, this commission saved our residents about $150,000 by contracting for law enforcement services as opposed to staying in the law enforcement MSTU. And we are also coming up on a significant savings for our residents in the, is it $100,000 a year range for solid waste services. Again, decisions this board made in terms of directing how we solicit those services. It's going to be a big savings for our residents.
Just to overview the guidelines and policies that we use when we're developing your budget. As we mentioned, we strive to hit a minimum of 2 months operating reserves in our major funds, your utility and general funds being the largest of your funds. We are at that in our utility funds. As the manager mentioned earlier, we're still working towards that goal in your general fund. The reasoning behind the 2 months, 2.5 months, is if we had some sort of large natural disaster happen. We got hit with a hurricane back in September, and we still haven't received FEMA funding for that. So if something were to happen to really put a hit on our cash reserves, it'd be quite some time before we could see recuperating those funds. We use our one-time revenue sources for one-time expenditures, so we don't rely on those in future years. So we put those either into reserves or we put them into special projects or capital. State law requires that we have a balanced budget, which is a good thing. As the manager mentioned, our utility and enterprise rates are established to meet the expenses within those funds, so they're self-supporting based on utility rates. And we strive to develop a diversified and stable revenue system, again, as the manager mentioned earlier.
This next slide just covers the items that we are going to be seeking direction from you on tonight and moving forward through the budget process. Just kind of highlight these now. There will be another slide at the end of the presentation where we can get specific direction on each one, but want you to be thinking about areas for revenue diversification. Similar to electric franchise fees, are there any other areas that you'd like us to seek to diversify our revenues? We need direction from you on what to do with the millage rate, and we'll give a little bit of explanation about what's happening with the homestead exemption amendment that will have a negative impact on our ad valorem revenues. Not so much direction, I guess, to be thinking about though what we're going to do in terms of law enforcement. Right now, our revenues, our property values are down for next fiscal year. So that means that our revenues are going to be essentially flat. The sheriff's contract, which is a large portion of our general fund expenses, it looks to go up by double digits, 10% or more, and so need to be thinking about how we would afford that type of an increase and what areas we might be willing to abstain or not abstain to take on decreases, where we would cut level of service to maintain law enforcement services if we can't negotiate a better deal. get direction from you on what we'd like to see us do with personnel expenses with regards to the budget. Our direction on capital improvement program. This current fiscal year, we're running about a $270,000 capital improvement program, which is essentially that minimum threshold for maintaining our infrastructure. Most of our infrastructure has a life of anywhere between 10 and 30 years, and we have enough assets in the ground now that if we don't do a minimal level of capital improvement for R&R, it will continue to deteriorate. So we're kind of at the minimum right now, and need to seek direction on where to go, whether we stay at that 270, whether our ad valorem revenues are going to force us into a lower amount of capital expenditure, or whether or what our plans are for stepping into a little bit bolder, not bolder, that's a poor word for that, a little healthier capital improvement program, so we can start to get out in front of some of the infrastructure issues that we've been facing. And then what to do with rate adjustment, I think that we're always going to touch on that. I think that this commission, or the previous commission, gave pretty clear direction. We have a new commissioner on board, so we can have some light discussion on what we think about utility rate adjustments.
All right. This is the doom and gloom slide. So thanks to the property appraiser, we have a reduction in our taxable value this year of about $7 million. So based on that, we have built the proposed budget using the rolled back rate. As the commission knows, the rolled back rate is the rate that generates the same amount of revenue to the city as the previous year's millage rate did. Based on that rolled back rate, though, we are deficient of revenues for expenditures. So we have prepared a budget that is what we consider to be less than a continuation budget, meaning that we are not continuing the same level of service with the current budget as we are in the current fiscal year. So the fiscal year 18 budget does not continue the same service levels as the fiscal year 17 budget. That's primarily driven by cuts to our capital improvement program, our renewals and replacements of our assets. We have cut approximately $160,000. As the manager just mentioned, our annual spending on capital improvement is about $270,000. So we've cut $160,000 of that capital improvement out in order to attempt to balance the budget. We also provide no staff merit increases, no staff cost of living increases, no staff increases of any kind. We offer no enhancements of any services, and we offer no addition of staff to support customer needs. So that's the doom and gloom.
Commissioner McGee.
Okay, I see the no addition of staff. Is that adding staff that we would need? I know we've got a couple of positions that are being, that have been posted already. Are we going to pull those positions, or are those positions still going to be included?
We do not propose to delete those positions, at least at this time. The continuation budget, it provides for a continuing of funding for those positions.
Okay.
Just to highlight some areas in revenue diversification, things that, most of these ideas come from what we see our peers do. Florida statutes affords us the ability to collect a utility on water tax sales up to 10%. And the city of Newberry is unique in that it doesn't collect any utility tax on water sales, which can be a badge of pride, because we do strive to be as tax friendly as we can be to our residents. It does provide for additional revenue, and it is a way to diversify our revenues. So In the past, when we've discussed this with the City Commission, there was no sincere interest in pursuing that, and so we're not advocating for it, but we do keep it on the list of potential revenue options. Each percent would net, up to 10% would net about $6,200 a year in annual revenue. So if the City of Newberry were like most Florida communities and took the full 10%, that would result in an additional $62,000 into our general fund budget. We discussed earlier this year adopting a natural gas franchise fee. We currently receive gas franchise fees from a couple of subdivisions on LP gas. We don't have natural gas actively in Newberry, but there is a desire and there are plans, and so we have been working to develop an RFP to establish a natural gas franchise, and once we get to that point, the Commission will then give us direction on what they'd like to see in the way of a natural gas franchise fee, which typically is in the 6% range, but can vary from 4 to 10%. The other thing that our Commission has also looked at in the past are special assessments. We currently utilize a special assessment in fire protection to help us fund fire department as a way of diversifying revenues and not loading everything up on in the general fund on the appraised property values for citizens. So we have an assessment for fire protection. Florida statutes affords us the ability to do special assessments for other types of programs, such as street improvements, and it would be a dedicated funding stream for roadway improvement programs. We can do special assessments for water and wastewater extensions or improvements, extensions being for new services, improvements being R&R type things. Stormwater utilities and stormwater assessments are somewhat common in Florida. The genesis of stormwater utilities, I hear stormwater assessment. I'd say stormwater utilities for just a little bit of background. We have been collecting general fund revenues via property values and property taxes for the last 100 years, and those taxes have gone to pay for things like public safety and public infrastructure. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the state of Florida said stormwater needs to be on your radar and you need to maintain that in addition to the other things you do. So their stormwater got added in, and it's just had a hard time doing proper stormwater maintenance. It's had a hard time getting a fair allocated share of funding. So when you see stormwater assessments or stormwater utilities popping up in the state of Florida, generally that's because the need to maintain stormwater facilities is kind of late into the game. It was thrown into the mix as, oh, by the way, city and county governments, you got to do this as well with your existing tax dollars. So again, staff's not advocating for that, but a little bit of history on why stormwater utilities and stormwater assessments seem to be cropping up more. I'd say in the last 20 years, Gainesville created the first that I know of in the state of Florida. And I think that the most recent one that is being discussed quite a bit in our community is Alachua County. We could do a special assessment for downtown redevelopment. Staff, again, is not advocating for that, but would say that's something that we might revisit if the Community Redevelopment Agency doesn't move forward, as we anticipate it will if the state of Florida does eventually put the axe to those types of things, and we want to see redevelopment in our downtown area. That would be a tool that we could consider, and we could do, state law allows us to do assessments for parks and recreation.
As we do every year. As we do every year, just to remind the Commission of where we fall with some of our peer cities in the area in terms of millage. We're pretty in the middle of the pack. There's a pretty tight bandwidth there between Gainesville and Newberry, and then we have some higher friends in the Waldes Archers and Hawthorns of the world. It is, I think, important to note, this is based off your current year's millage, and it also is using the current year MSTUs. based upon information we've received from the county. The county is proposing an almost half a mil increase in their fire MSTU to take it from the 1.77 to a 2.26. They are also proposing to eliminate their fire MSTU and change it out to a fire MSBU, which would operate more similarly to our fire assessment. The law MSTU, which, as the commission knows, the commission opted to leave last year, is currently 2.43. Again, based on preliminary numbers, the county is proposing to increase the law MSTU to 2.52. That's another pretty healthy increase there. The total increase on those MSTUs is going to be close to 0.6. So once we add those in, the unincorporated moves a little bit closer up, and some of our peer cities, our neighboring cities, not really our peer cities, but the Waldos, Archers, and Hawthorns of the world move up in terms of their millage rates.
What was the fire again?
The fire is proposed, preliminary was 2.267. But again, the commission, as far as I'm aware, and Chief Buckner has been following it a lot more closely than I have, County Commission has given direction to staff to move forward with a fire assessment. So, on our current year's millage rate, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a devaluation in property values in the city this year. Our preliminary numbers from the property appraiser's office are $368 million. That's a almost 2% reduction from our taxable value of last year, which was $374 million. So that brings our rollback rate to the 6.1423 mils, which, as I mentioned earlier, is what we've based our proposed budget on, which is adjust from the current millage of 5.9089. The property appraiser does have to provide us the final taxable values on July 1st. So we're hoping they made some huge mistakes and Ricky can go back over there and fix it. So there are generally some changes. We don't anticipate any large changes. We've had lots of conversations with the property appraiser about the situation we're in. The chart at the bottom gives you the different all sorts of options the commission could have if they intended to increase the millage, what revenue that would mean to the city, and then the effect on our average homeowner. As you can see, for each tenth of a mil that we increase, the city would receive $35,000, and it'd be about $11 annually to the average homeowner in the city of Newberry. The increase to the 6.1423 for the rollback rate is about a $24 a year increase to the average homeowner. This graph is our taxable value over a 10-year period. As you can see, between 2007 and 2012, we were really booking it. We had about a 27% increase in property values over those times, starting about $260 million and ending just over $360 million, gaining $100 million in property value. Immediately following that, in 2012, is when we started having the issues with Florida Rock, Vulcan, contesting their appraisals, and we also started to really feel the effects of the recession and lost a lot of value. So we dipped. So we're right now at the 368, which is about on where we were in 2012. We peaked last year. It was the first time that we'd gotten above our highest level. But with the current valuation, this does put us back about where we were 5 years ago. This is our changes in taxable value by the different categories. We thought this was important for the commission to see where the different valuation changes took place. This information was provided to us by the property appraiser. As you can see, we added almost $20 million in new value in residential. That's a lot of new construction, but it's also just values of our community increasing. However, we lost $26 million in tangible personal property. That is almost entirely Argos and depreciating of the Argos plant and their tangible property. So we lost $26 million there. We lost some value in vacant land, although that vacant land just turned into one of these other categories because something was built on it. So that's mainly where our losses went. I do think it's important to note that while we do have this $20 million increase in our residential and in our home values, as the commission knows, the Save Our Homes Amendment does limit the increase that a homeowner can see on their property values. This year it is maxed out at the 3%. So if your house was worth $100,000 last year and the property appraiser said it's worth $120,000 this year, you're only going to get taxed on $103,000 because you're capped out on the how much your actual taxable value can increase every year based on that Save Our Homes Amendment.
Just, Dallas, as a question from that, the $26 million loss in tangible property values, what is our expectation moving forward with that annually? Is that going to recur, or is that a one-time reduction?
It is my understanding that we can expect to see that occurring.
So for the commission, then, every year, if we don't see an increase in property values in all other categories of at least $27 million a year, we're going to be in the same boat every year with our revenues from property tax decreasing.
All right. So we had doom and gloom. This is doom and gloom part 2, the Florida legislature. As Mike and I were calling it earlier, we know what you did last summer, the Florida legislature. As the commission's been aware, the legislature loves local communities and loves local government, so they've done a lot of really good things for us this year. One of the most important things they did is they put on the November 2018 ballot a constitutional amendment which will allow for an additional homestead exemption on property. A homestead exemption would be $25,000 on property assessed at over $100,000. We anticipate that that amendment will pass because people tend to vote themselves lower taxes. So we also anticipate that once that passes, the first fiscal year the city of Newberry will feel the effects will be 2020. What I've done on this chart is project out our taxable values to 2020. As you can see, we're projecting slight increases, and then 2020. Based on our current data and our current homes, if we add no more homes, we'll lose 7% in value overnight based on the Save Our Homes, which would be about $35 million in value lost and about $200,000 annual loss of revenue to the city. $200,000 annual loss based on current. You know, as we continue to add more houses and more homes, the valuation that we'll lose increases.
You said that on 200?
Yeah, it's a 7% reduction, $35 million off the tax rolls, a $200,000 loss based on our current millage rates and our current housing. So. Moving into our personnel, we do have the Florida retirement system did increase this year. However, they were very minimal increases, really not of any significance to your budget. And then, you know, as always, we do not have our health insurance increases. As we all know, the health insurance world's a little bit up in the air at the moment. The current budget has plugged in a 12% increase as a worst-case scenario. So we hope that that number will come down, and we anticipate that it will.
And the 12% increase, we're budgeting at about almost $30,000. So if we come in at even half that, the savings to the budget is in the $15,000 range. It's not going to be the savior of our system. These health insurance increases just aren't that big a portion in our overall budget. Every penny counts for us, for sure. So as Dallas mentioned, our current base budget that we're building includes no increases for staff. We have come off a 3-year period where we did up to 5% merit increases, and that was 3 fiscal years ago, and that was the first staff increases for, I believe, a 7-year period. And then the year after that, there were no staff increases, but we did a pay grid adjustment, and anybody that was outside of the market for their pay grid got moved to the bottom of market. Last year, we did an up to 4% merit increase for staff, and so this year we've contemplated, as options, maybe some combination of COLA and merit. When we got news from the property appraiser, we just kind of put all that on hold. We'd certainly like to offer something in the way of increases, but it really is going to depend on how we start building the budget and the direction we get from the commission on where they'd like to see us set our millage rate. We have, during the budgeting process, we were talking about the need for new positions, and what came back to us from department heads that we think have merit. None of these positions are programmed in, but they are positions that we think tend to have merit. We need some administrative support in areas associated with finance, human resources, and fire department. Those are all areas that just don't have any administrative. Everybody that works there is a titled position with a certain task and role, and we don't have anybody there that's kind of doing all those other things to fill in the blanks. An area that we have a deficiency in support is recreation maintenance, and our facilities. The city has a lot of recreation facilities, a lot of acreages in recreation facilities, and we haven't increased the number of maintenance personnel for forever. And so as you go out and you look at our facilities in 2017, you can see that they're not in the condition that they were in 2007 and 2008. And it's generally, we just don't have enough warm bodies. If we take on any one project during the summer growing season, just take a day off to, well, let's attack this one thing, it puts us behind on our mowing cycles for the whole rest of the week. I mean, there's just no free time from early in the spring to late in the fall. The only time we work at all on special projects is in the non-growing season, and there's just more of a need for special projects. That's, if you walk out to our baseball fields and you see our fences curled up, you see the top rail fences aren't where they need to be, you see dugouts that aren't being as well maintained as they could be, they're not being painted or things of that nature. See, we are deficient in clay and infields. Those are kind of the types of things I'm talking about. Again, we haven't programmed that in, but there is a need for a maintenance staff person. We've also considered, in lieu of a maintenance staff person, the inmate crew. We started an inmate crew in February to help in the public works area, streets and roads, and that cost us $60,000 to $65,000 a year, where we essentially pay for the prison guard that oversees this, a crew of 10. And we get that crew of 10 for 6 to 7 hours a day. As long as we can keep equipment working for them, they're extremely productive. It's been amazing. So we consider, we did the math on it. We think that one prison crew is about equal to 7.5 FTEs of city maintenance personnel at the cost of about 2 FTEs. So there's some real value there. So we would consider that in Parks and Recreation, again, as long as funding's to help out in Parks and Recreation, as long as funding's available for us. And then in utility systems, that's another area where from a just maintenance staff working in the fields, we haven't increased staffing levels in more than 10 years. And we have a need in the water wastewater area to add 1 staff person, budget permitting. The utility side's a little different. You know, as long as our rates can afford whatever is brought forward, that's generally what we're talking about. It's you know, with what's being presented, if that person costs us an extra $45,000 or $50,000 a year, will our rates sustain that additional person, or what will be the rate impact that the commission would then have to consider? Next consideration is what to do with the operating budget, operating and maintenance budgets. This commission would remember that from 2012 to 2016, there was direction given to the city, to staff, and the operating budgets were reduced across the board 10%. And I guess to me, that was a great accomplishment for the city to achieve. However, it does put us in the position of there's not a lot of fat to be cutting. When we have lean times, we're already dealing with a lean budget. And so I just wanted to make that point. We've provided few service level increases. Most notably, the inmate crew in Public Works was a decision that the Commission made last year to increase the service level in Public Works, and they've only been working since February, but the feedback I get in the community and from staff is that it's very noticeable. The things that I've seen them take on have shown immediate improvement, and we get immediate feedback that's nice, and our community is very appreciative of that. We also, in fiscal year 15, added a code enforcement position that is slowly seeing some fruit from that labor in terms of getting some areas that have been chronic eyesores in our community cleaned up. But aside from that Public Works crew and from codes enforcement, there have not been a lot of service level enhancements other than, the things. We've done quite a few things in the utility billing area, but we've mostly done that with existing staff. We just take on new programs. We've contracted things out like our call service center and our the utility bill stuffing, the way we do our utility bills and those enhancements. I guess I should also mention that in the last 2 years we've made significant improvements in our facilities maintenance. The way we care for our facilities. We've got a professional staff. They work very hard and put in an immense amount of time trying to upgrade, bring all of our facilities up to a minimum level, bringing things to our attention that, hey, we got to start paying attention to roofs only last 20 years in the Florida heat, air conditioning systems only last 15 to 20 years, so we have to be diligent about planning for those things so that we don't end up with a big backlog of expensive projects. And from the way we build our budget, which is personnel, operating, and then capital improvement, this, capital improvement is kind of the last element that we would discuss with you. We break our capital improvement program into two areas. There's renewal and replacement of existing infrastructure, which we consider to be the needs. It's an investment the community's already made. It's infrastructure that we're maintaining. We just got to make sure we don't let it wear out and become obsolete. And we have enough assets in the ground now that there is a minimum capital level just to maintain it. Things like a road inventory of 50 miles. 50 miles of paved roadway that we maintain has an average of 30-year life, and it costs an average of $100,000 a mile to resurface. So I think that if you're going to get 30 years out of it, you better be spending, about 1/30 of the value of your asset every year to maintain it, or somewhere in the area of $100,000 to $120,000 a year for a city like Newberry. So we can make those same parallels in water, electric, wastewater, storm infrastructure, and in our facilities, that we try to break everything down to useful lives and the common denominators. And we have 20 air conditioning systems that are all valued between $5,000 and $15,000. So we think, and they have a 20-year life. So we think we should be programmatically replacing one a year or so and trying to budget for that. So that's that baseline capital improvement budget that we see as a need. It's not a want. That also applies to vehicles and equipment. Our computer, this commission has been very good for at least the last 3 years at funding renewal and replacement on computers. So we've been able to address some systems that were obsolete and prevent other areas from going obsolete. The next area are expansions and enhancements. Those generally tend to be more of the wants. We want to see a new this or a new that. It's a community want. From a priority perspective, staff was going to recommend that when we have capital improvement money, we need to be spending it first and highest priority on renewal and replacement of existing infrastructure, and then second on expansions and enhancements. That's something that this board has given us direction to in the past. We share that philosophy, and that's how we are building this year's budget as well. So that brings us full circle back to directions or feedback. Before we get to September, when we're having budget hearings and adopting a budget, we'll have to fully evaluate each of these areas. But as we can go through them tonight and get any feedback that you'd like to give us in terms of each of these categories, I'll go by one. Or if it's something that you're thinking about now and you decide you want to email us, in the next 2 weeks, our next workshop is going to be late in June, June the 28th, and we're going to be singularly focused on general fund. At that, we will have a proposed budget for you there. We'd like to get enough input so that we know that that proposed budget that we're presenting is based on our current millage rate of 5.9089, and we do promise to come to work tomorrow and try to build a budget based upon that millage rate, or whether it's based on the rollback rate or some other rate. I'd like to get some feedback on that and the types of things you'd like to see us begin to put into that budget. So with that, any areas for revenue diversification that you'd like to see us pursue? Things like, again, staff's not advocating for, but things like a water utility tax that we do not have that most of our peers would, or special assessments. I believe it was last fiscal year, this commission contemplated some sort of a stormwater assessment. We've discussed at some junctures a roads assessment where we would take, just say $5 a unit, and it would generate $20,000 a year, and we would put that directly into roads. It would be earmarked, it would be allocated, it couldn't go anywhere else, similar to how we do our fire assessment. Any thoughts or feedback on any of those items for revenue diversification?
Mike and Dallas, excuse me. First of all, I certainly appreciate the level of professionalism that has gone into this presentation tonight. I know it's only taken us about 40 minutes to go through it, but it probably takes about an hour or two per minute on your side, and I know the department heads have been working since the first part of the year. My general feeling has always been when the value goes down, I feel like we need to tighten our belt. I've never been a real big fan of trying to stay with the rollback rate. But I have been a big fan of trying to get ourselves away from the dedicated property value model and getting some things that are a little bit more stabilized. And I think we have done a pretty good job of that over the last few years. I also, not only for this year, but looking into the crystal ball over the next couple of years, I think we probably have to really make some hard decisions about staff particularly. I think we'd have to get into it a little bit more if we're going to start talking about hiring freezes and that sort of thing. So I look forward to doing that over the next couple of meetings. There's one other thing I had. I'll get back to that. But does anybody else want to speak? Commissioner Coleman?
I'm just like you, Commissioner. We're going to see more reduction out there at Argos, and we banked pretty much our budget way before any of us were here, besides Monty. To pretty much 50% of it or close to it to support the city, and we're going to have to start looking and changing our mindset, because right now commercial is where it's at for us and we don't have it. And if you look at with everything that the state's doing with the residential side, we're going to, it's going to hurt us. So it's time for us to tighten our belt here. Did you figure it out from there, Tim?
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. I'll just go down the line if you. Commissioner McGee.
We go talking about tightening our belt. One area I do not want to see us start to fall back on is this capital improvement program. I think we've done a good job over the last couple of years of actually funding our R&R and kind of building our reserves. I'd hate to take a step back and get away from that, because I know that there have been a lot of cans that have been kicked down the road for years and years and years, and I think that over the last, since I've been up here, the last 3 years or so, we've kind of fixed some of this. I'm thinking, 10, 15 years down the road, I just don't want, when this commission completely changes and nobody that's up here now is up here, I don't want to leave those guys, having to make those decisions. So that's the one area that I really do not want to see us kind of take a step back on, is the capital improvement plan.
Okay. Commissioner Farnsworth.
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I don't think we need to be messing with the capital improvement either. I think that's one area that we have made a lot of progress in, and I don't want to see it where we don't have the money in a few years to do something that we really need to have done. Also, I'm not in favor of the going to the rollback rate either. There's going to be some tough decisions made as far as personnel, some tough decisions made as far as certain programs, and I think that this staff and the city commission will be able to work something out and go forward from here.
I didn't speak necessarily to the capital improvement program, but I think we probably, that's kind of an area I think initially I'm thinking if we were to draw down that, we could potentially have a compounding effect years out. In so much as a lot of the stuff now is already kind of antiquated, putting that off any further, that stuff is certainly not getting any cheaper moving forward, and the compounding effect, I think, is probably a key adjective on something like that.
Well, this is my first budget go-round. This is pretty harsh. I'm more shocked than I thought I would be. I just had a couple questions. It's even going to be even more devastating when that extra $25,000 homestead exemption goes into effect. I can't even imagine how we're going to get around that. But do you have an estimate how much we'll lose from that? Our town will lose when they reduce the amount. Increase the amount of homestead exemption.
About based on the current number of homesteaded homes, it'd be about $200,000 a year.
So we're going to lose another $200,000 due to that extra exemption, and then I'm not for adding taxes, but I was interested on this utility tax on water sales. If it's such a common practice everywhere else, historically, why haven't we done it? It's nice that we haven't, but is there a reason we just didn't do it? Because if everybody else is doing it, I think it doesn't make sense that we're losing that stream of revenue.
I'm not certain that we know why the commission, don't know that the commission ever considered it, or the commission felt like that they would prefer to keep all of their revenue stream for general fund very dedicated to property taxes. I think that generally when people are complaining about their electric bill, electric bill or they're complaining about their property tax rate, they're generally assuming all other things being equal. And so when we had our discussions about getting electric franchise fees, that was one of the things that became apparent to staff as we were researching this, is that we've maintaining a millage rate that's close to the same as everybody else's, but everybody else gets a franchise fee and we don't. And so that hurts our revenue. It makes us less competitive to provide the same level of service because they expect the same millage rate and they expect the same level of service. So the utility tax on water sales is similar in that every other community does it, so it's safe for a commission or city to go there in that regards. It diversifies your revenue stream, so it's safe for a community to go there in that regards. The only thing is you can't state that it's anything other as a new fee or tax that comes from your residents. And so you have to be candid and honest about that, that's what it would be. Now, in the past, this commission has offset when we get new fees either through the fire assessment or to some extent the franchise fee. There was an offset. It's not always a dollar for dollar offset, but if we gain $10 from a new revenue stream, we're going to give $5 back through property tax reductions is direction that we've been receiving. So those are some things, if we want to continue to diversify our revenue, and it does add $65,000 to the city coffers, then we can do an offset through property taxes. I guess the other thing that I would bring up, that the last time we had the discussion, is the commission making the point that the folks that are connected to the city's utility system and are paying for a water system, they typically aren't getting a lot of the other exemptions. So they're already carrying a lion's share of the burden for the general fund. And if we provide a tax, utility tax on water sales, they'll be picking up a little bit and give it back through property taxes. Then the folks in the outlying areas that aren't paying for water service will be getting a benefit to the ones that are in the interior that are already not being exempted. So that's one rationale I've heard in the past.
Okay, thank you. I just had one more question too. And it's shocking because I think median house sales values have gone up in the last year. How did this happen? That, or you don't know, but maybe
It was
we've
the-
lost value in our property taxes, and
That's
we're not the only municipality, or are we the only municipality that lost value?
I
And do
thought
you have
the
an
one
idea why that
slide,
happened?
yeah, the one slide was probably the most
We didn't.
Most telling
We didn't lose
here.
in,
He said it went down. We lost value in our property values. went
Mr.
down.
Mayor,
I think it was
we
down.
lost it because of tangible property off
Oh,
of
I thought it was
Argos.
property values.
No, here.
Okay, I
page,
see.
slide 12.
Got it.
Mr. Mayor,
I see.
to answer a couple of those questions is, we are the only community in Alachua County who did decrease in value. Every other community saw 11, 8%, 6% increases. We did increase in residential. We added $19.5 million of value in our residential sales, our residential value, which is about 13% increase.
Thank you.
That's, if you look in the change in units, that's 84 new units that were added to the rolls, plus any increase in the average sales. However, again, going back to that Save Our Homes, just because the average sale price in the community increases, could have increased 10%, we're only allowed to have 3% of that based on the constitutional amendment the state passed several years ago, the voters passed. So even if home sales are increasing, we're limited on the amount of taxable value that we receive. And then despite the $19.5 million of taxable value we gained in residential, Argos depreciated
I see.
a much larger
Sorry, I
portion
was
off
missing.
the rolls.
Yes, sir.
This question is directed at Dallas also. In the 5.9089 of last year, was that also our law enforcement in there too? I can't remember that. That's
Yes,
in
sir.
there, correct? Which was $740,000.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
I-
Are you
So-
done?
Yeah, for right now. Go ahead.
I was just going to pause for us and give a couple of the citizens who have shown up here an opportunity. Mr. Norfleet, you came in first. Did you want to? Okay. Then, Commissioner Coleman, you have the floor back.
So, all right, back to this again, $740,000. What's the percentage? You know where I'm going with this, but what's the percentage of, for millage? Do you remember?
Off the top of my head, I
What we
believe
added?
we collect $2.1 million in property taxes. We pay $740 in law enforcement, so about a third of our property taxes go to fund law enforcement. We added roughly
Two
2
mills?
mills last
2
year.
mills.
We were at 3.9 and change. We went to 5.9 and change.
And our deficit for this year right now is 1.7.
It's
No.
a 1.7%
1.7
reduction.
reduction.
Correct. It's about $7 million valuation reduction.
I'll keep thinking about this.
The law enforcement is one consideration that the staff is looking for feedback from us. If you want to go ahead and tackle that one first, go right ahead.
All right, Mayor?
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to give Commissioner Jason
First crack at it.
first crack at it, and I'll be the last after it goes through.
Okay. Commissioner McGee.
When it comes to law enforcement, where I'm at is crossing guards and school resource officers, and that's it. I don't care about this these extra patrols or any of that stuff. I kind of feel like this is an area that, you know, if we're going to have to make hard decisions and tighten our belts, this is one area we can do it in. I know that the sheriff is not going to be in favor of that, but this is I've talked to a lot of citizens about this, and I kind of get the feeling that they're fine with crossing guards and school resource officers. That seems to be the two biggest things that are of the most importance to them, and I agree.
Is that your feeling based on the anticipated increase of the costs, or is that irrespective?
That's overall.
Regardless.
That's overall.
So despite whatever the cost is, you'd actually lean towards just going
school
to...
resource officers.
Okay, that's
crossing
noted.
guards.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
Well, the citizens I've talked to have said that they feel that the school resource officers are not really needed, and it's a waste of money, and that it should be paid for by the school board and not the citizens of Newberry. But basically, anything that is brought to us from Sadie Darnell, will not support.
Myself, I have heard actually a wide range of different things. I have sticker shock with regards to the costs. I have a very difficult time trying to justify that expense, and anybody that I have spoken with in the community about that, their knee-jerk reaction is that's absolutely ridiculous. So I think as a body, to use a loose term, I feel like we could sell to the community that the price tag is way too high, and this is what we felt like we could afford. I feel that the SROs and the crossing guards are theoretically probably the most important. I think the logistics of trying to work that out may be a little bit more cumbersome than we imagine. I could foresee the sheriff, whether she could or not, again, remains to be seen, not allowing her deputies to be used in the schools and/or affiliated with a crossing guard program. I think we would need to almost get the buy-in from the crossing guards as to whether or not they would take a check directly from us, or if we would have to attach those to a different department. All those logistics are kind of unchecked in my head as far as how that would actually work out.
I was going to ask, what was the increase that the sheriff is asking over last year's contract? We don't have a contract yet, but what is they're asking for?
Generally, it's in the $115,000 range.
And my feeling is that she hasn't told us what we're getting for that, or is it just that that's what the cost has gone up for? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry
She did?
to interrupt you. She's been very explicit about what
Okay.
we're getting for that.
Okay.
It's the same level of service that we currently get.
But it's just
That's
costing us more.
3 SROs, 4 school crossing guards, and 1 full-time enhanced traffic position.
But that doesn't explain the increase, is what I'm asking. Like, why is it costing more for the same level of service? I'm sorry.
She
For
has
justification.
tons of backup information.
Okay.
Her backup information says that it is worth $1.3 million, and she discounts it to $740 this year and proposes to discount it to $850 next year.
Well, I still feel that, if it's $115,000 and what we're missing, if we go back to the $700-some thousand crossing guards and school resources, maybe we can hire them privately. But this is my first go-around. I don't know if
Yeah.
we can do that, so
Sure.
pardon me if I'm speaking
I don't
out of
think
turn.
any of us actually have the answer yet of whether or not we can actually pull that off. Mike, have you speculated the scenario of just crossing guards and SROs, what that would cost?
Our next meeting with Sheriff Darnell is next Wednesday. I will definitely be broaching that. During last year's negotiation, we had scheduled what we were calling the cafeteria style offering, where we could select just crossing guards or just SROs, and we moved through 6 months worth of negotiation with that being on the table, and then in January, just a few weeks before you were to decide on their contract, she said no, she wouldn't offer that type of selectivity. It was all or nothing. So my guess is that she's going to maintain the position of all or nothing. We either take the full offering or we don't get any of it. I'm also meeting with both Alachua and High Springs. Our read on state law is that they can't provide law enforcement services in Newberry unless there's a referendum held by both communities that agree to it. Unless we're contiguous, and we're currently not. We're one parcel away from being contiguous, but that we believe that either of those entities could provide school resource officers and/or crossing guards, and we'd still be in compliance with state laws. So in our meetings with High Springs and Alachua, in addition to talking just generally about, well, long term, if we decide to start our own police department, what should be looking at, which would be about half the meeting. The other half of the meeting would be on a very short-term need, would you provide SROs in our schools, and would you provide school crossing guards? And we think that from the SRO perspective, we currently have 3 SROs in Newberry, 1 for each of the schools. There's, for cost considerations, we could consider having the one at the middle school and the one at the elementary school float back and forth with some time ratio, and then so we'd only have 2 in the community as opposed to 3. So we're considering that as an alternative or an option for consideration.
Have you been able to discern from the numbers that she is giving us what those numbers could potentially look like? What does an SRO cost? What does a crossing guard cost?
Her numbers are, I'm speaking from the top of my head, but an SRO from her numbers is in the $125,000 a year range. That's fully equipped. If you move over to the models that Alachua and High Springs have set up, it's significantly less expensive. They're running SROs in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. And it's just, without getting into a real belabored, what Alachua and High Springs have done is they take a full-time full-time officer that's part of your full-time staff, and during school, they put that officer in the school. And during holiday weeks and during summer vacation and spring break, that officer's back on patrol. Well, when that officer's in the school, they get a part-time reservist to fill their position on patrol because they feel like it's kind of it's easier to find someone to fill in temporarily on patrol than it is to find someone temporarily to interface with children in the role of SRO. So they put their seasoned officers in the schools, but the additional cost, the impact to their budget is just for the temporary part-time help that is filling in on patrol services. It's kind of a very creative way. Both communities have done it, so they are able to fund their SROs, school resource officers, for almost what the school board is providing in funding for SROs. Like both of those communities have, well, I shouldn't say both. Alachua has collapsed. Alachua has 4 schools, and they get funding for 4 SROs, but they only have 3 officers in schools. The 2 elementary schools share an SRO, then the middle school has 1 dedicated, and the high school has 1 dedicated. So the City of Alachua residents fund 3 SROs for 4 schools. We haven't had that option in Newberry, but we are considering it.
Commissioner McGehee first, then Coleman.
Hey, so you're saying that that the money that the school board pays goes actually to the municipality, like Alachua or High Springs, directly?
Yes, sir.
So
That is
if
correct.
we were to go with that, they would just send it to us, or would it? Well, I guess
It would.
it doesn't matter either way. But
Essentially, it would come to us. It
Yeah.
would either go to us or the agency we're contracting
Yeah,
with, and we
okay.
would get credit for that payment.
Commissioner Coleman. Sorry for Jason's interruption.
Yeah, I know it. So here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
Here's the deal. Majority of those students over there in middle school, I know in middle school and elementary, are not even Newberry citizens. And 57% are not, correct? So it's pretty high. But where I'm going at with this is that, so we're going to put the burden only on the city of Newberry citizens to pay for all the other children to be protected. Do you see where I'm at here? That's not on us. I mean, me as a commissioner, I know the first thing is the safety of my children and all the citizens here. My wife too. Sorry, baby. But where I'm going with this is, and I know that's the number one thing, is safety, infrastructure, the 3 majors. But we pay taxes in this county. We pay a lot of taxes in this county. It's not, I don't think, on us 5 for Sadie, for us to pay additional spiff money to her to take care of us. We already pay her. And it's not, I don't think it's on us 5 for her to do her job. And I think that's $740,000 that we are taking from our citizens that could, and we banked on Argos, I brought that up earlier, that we could use for our city. And that's where I'm at, and I'll end it just like that. I want you guys to think about this. It's not on us. We already do. We got a commissioner that puts red flags down here just across the street. It's not on us. It's on our sheriff and those 5, whatever kind of people you want to call them, that's up there that's running the county commission. It's not on us. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Farnsworth.
In addition to the cost that Sadie Darnell would be charging us, does she also get the $90,000 from the school board?
Does that money come to us and then? No, she gets it, and it's offset.
What's
How's that
that?
There's-
Agency.
I'm
Sorry.
Go ahead.
The agency who provides the school resource deputies receives that money. So for our 3 schools, the school board is contracted with the sheriff's office, and they pay her directly that $19,000 per school, and it offsets in our formula we use to build the rate model. We took that as an offset. So the $120,000 for a school resource deputy, we get charged $100,000 because we have the $20,000 credit from the school board.
Commissioner Glanzer, we're talking about a portion of the money. When we write our county tax bill, part of that money goes to the school board.
Okay.
The school board writes a check back to the sheriff as a portion of the expense that they cover for the SROs.
Okay, and that's included in the original amount we have. in the
Yeah.
bucket. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
You got it. Staff, or anybody from city want to jump in now? All right, we have spurred something. Yeah, just turn the.
Okay. Yeah, I just, y'all's job up here, like you said, you got the job to do, but, I always hear every time I come to meet, how to raise more revenue, and, that revenue ends up being a tax, you know what I mean? And, I'll just say I'd look for it to try to cut it, and, watch your expenses and get it down. And I know it costs money to run businesses, but you got to remember, I've always heard up here that this is a business. Well, the difference in the city and a business, if I got a restaurant across the street and Coleman's got one on this side, I can only charge so much before he's cutting me under, and he keeps me in line on my prices. To me, the city's more of a co-op. It's designed to provide the services cheaper than we can provide them ourselves out in the country. That's the reason all the old farmers used to live in town. They all lived in there because it was cheaper to get the water, the sewer, the electric than it was out in the farm because couldn't run it. Well, now it's a whole lot cheaper to live out in the country. And, everybody wants the big services and all that, but I think we need to go back to, and this isn't just the city of Newberry's problem, this is the whole country's problem. I think we need to go back to the basics, provide that service that is a true co-op. Because like I said, I've heard it for years. Well, it's a business. It's not a business because you don't have any competition. What keeps businesses in competition is somebody else is going to fight them with the price. Well, y'all got a monopoly, and so it's easy just to tax. But originally it was designed to be a co-op, so we could get all this cheaper. So, I think a lot of these, all these extra services that we do, we need to keep them in check. Provide people, like you said, the essentials, and it's just like parks and spaces. We get the money from the county when they do that taxes, and then they give you that money. Well, we build something with it, and then it costs us a pile of money to maintain that. It just keeps costing us more and more money to maintain it. And, I think we need to be careful about how much stuff, that free money ends up costing you a pile of money most of the time and then the long term. But just keep it in mind, everybody can, it's tough to pay all the bills now. I hear it from the homeowners because I think I'm the one that's setting the rates on the electric and the water and the sewer because I get all those complaints. But so I just direct them to Mike New over there. And but like I said, I'd focus, like you said, I'd focus on keeping my costs down and not providing more services. I mean, I know it all sounds good and say, hey, we're going to do this and this and this. And it's like you said, Sadie Darnell and those budgets so big because it's kind of like the school board's budgets because I think 53% is spent on administration. And, all of them need to do a little bit cheaper, I think, personally. But good luck.
You're right. Your point's well taken. I know as far as most of us over the longer span of time talking about the budgets, going into the wild spaces, public places, it was about not creating any more cost centers. So that speaks to what you're saying. And as far as raising revenue, if it's like-minded up here, I probably need to check myself and just say we need more of a diversification. I don't want to increase taxes at all, but the diversification just helps, and the planning kind of helps level out the peaks, level out the valleys a little bit more. So that could be something I can improve on myself. Staff, do you have everything that you need that you wanted to get it done tonight, or the couple other boxes you want to check?
I think we have discussed all of the considerations. I think I have a pretty good understanding of where you are. I think we got our work cut out for us to achieve what's what the general direction we've got is we don't want to go to the rollback rate. The general direction I've got is no rollback rate. We're going to stick with 5.9089. And we're going to present a budget at 5.9089, and we're going to tell you what's not in it. Because I think at this point, based on what I'm recalling, we cannot maintain a continuation budget that would include capital expending at that without something being cut. So we're going to ask the commission what service we're going to cut to come in with a balanced budget at 5.089 would be what I expect us to present to you at the end of June.
I have one more thing, and just kind of off the top of my head. This creates a little bit of a picture which further emphasizes our need for some more big commercial tenants. I have this image in my mind that our city's kind of like a mall, and we've got to have some anchor tenants, and then we can fill in the cross streets and those kind of things. And it's imperative on Brian, your department, to get out there and go start beating on some doors. You can't spend, all the time working on planning. I know it's hard, but we rely on you and your department to try to get some of those anchor tenants out there for us to do something. I know we've got Top Shelf coming in, but it's not going to be an anchor tenant for us. And I think it's all incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we keep our eyes and ears available in our daily walk of potential people that we can do that. You're probably on the front line of that for us, so
It's my battle cry.
you handle the yeoman's work on that. Closing statements are of any kind?
Yeah. With the cap 10 that we have in residential and Save Our Homes and everything else that's coming up with legislature, residential is not going to keep this town going. We got to start diversifying some way. Mike New is, I guess, pretty much in this meeting has shoved it down our throats to say we have got to find other sources, and in that also tighten our belt. We have rode that horse of Argos way too long, man. We're going to have to do something else here. And but I know because we got the right guy here, we're gonna be all right.
Anything, Jason? Bonnie?
Oh,
No. Go right ahead.
hey, you're first.
By all means. No, go ahead.
So we have been riding that horse for many, many years on economic development, and I have to tell you that there was 2 or 3 years of intense work we did and came up with a plan for economic development. And with all due respect, it's not the job of the city or Brian's department to go bring the businesses here. It's their job to provide the foundation for it. And there was a wonderful report submitted by the EDC 2 years ago, I think, by Dr. O'Neill on putting everything together that we got our big grant for and studied on, and it told us what we could do. I'd like to see that report taken off the shelf, and let's look at it hard this year, because there's things in there. It's an outline. CHW came in and did their great study on this corridor. Again, EDC did an inventory of all of our assets, everything we have here. We have a tool. We need to use that tool, and that's what the city does. Finds out how we can implement that, not necessarily go knock on doors, because that's not what the city does. But I think by doing that, I agree that our economic development is our way out of this problem we're having. And that's what I have to say.
Yes, sir.
I think we all need to be realistic too, in the fact that even if we did go out right now and start beating on doors, I mean, you're looking at something that's going to take some time to build. I mean, the way I see it, we've we've really spent the last, well, like I was saying, since I've been up here, we've spent time getting the house in order as far as the city's business. Commissioner Glanzer talking about the work the EDC did. I kind of see it as, you know, we've set the table for the dinner guests. Now we've just got to go out and find the dinner guests to invite, and then, you know, of course, you have to wait for the meal to be cooked before you can eat. So, I just, you know, I'm all for getting out and getting after it and trying to get businesses in. And I think that the citizens showed that, you know, this last election that they're wanting it too by voting for that tax abatement referendum. So. I think we're on the right track. It's not as fast as any of us want it to be as far as getting here, but you know, we just got to keep working at it.
Very good. Anybody else from the community?
I'd like to offer one thing for consideration. I've always considered this not to be on the radar for this commission. I don't recommend it. But I do think that based on the discussion I'm hearing about economic development, you should at least be aware of it. The last 2 or 3 opportunities we've had to compete for a larger company landing in Newberry, they were looking for more available square feet than we offered anywhere. They wanted a warehouse type building that was bigger than anything we offered, and when we say there's not in our inventory, it's kind of, you can count the buildings, the large buildings that are available for lease on one hand. I mean, I don't want this to be taken as Mike's recommendation, but there are communities that have said we are going to make the investment, we're going to get a loan, we're going to put 10,000 square feet of warehouse up and stamp it for commercial or industrial use, and it's going to be available the next time somebody comes knocking. So I don't expect feedback on that. I just want y'all to be aware that that is a different step towards economic development. That's raising the ante maybe more than Newberry can afford to do. But I want y'all to be aware that some communities do that. The one I can think of is Auburn, and what they did was they planted the seed money, and they built their first one, and whenever it sold, they took that money and just built the second one. And so their community investment is in one building. They just keep rolling it forward, so there's always a building available for whoever comes in. And I think they've had some success. Auburn's a lot bigger than Newberry. Auburn is in the 30,000 population range, but you know, so they're not huge like Gainesville. But that's what another community did and had some pretty good success with it.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
One thing I was wondering about, Mike, is the sewer and the water lines. I mean, if you have a building of that nature, you still have to have water and sewer running to that. And are we able to increase our infrastructure that way? Or, I mean, it doesn't seem like we're making much progress in expanding this water and sewer lines.
As a rule, you let development pay for those extensions. This commission made an exception to that rule with something that was pretty aggressive and novel by saying we're going to build a water main out here on a promise to get reimbursed. And we had the funding available to do it. We had been getting lots of feedback that was hurting development along that corridor, was the lack of water and sewer. That's another thing when the Gainesville Center for Economic Outreach says we have Project Lima, and they're manufacturing and they're looking for this and that. When you say we don't have anything zoned like that on with existing utilities, you're out of the game. So by doing that utility extension speculatively, that gets us more in the game. So it's just the amount of pain that we're willing to withstand in terms of making those extensions. There's 200 acres adjacent to Easton that have water, sewer, and electric and zoning ready to go. hadn't had any takers on that. We have all that property fronting State Road 26 between Canterbury and State Road 45. The feedback we get on that is that it's not competitively priced. I'm not in the market. I don't know. So where our competitively priced land is, there's no utilities. Where there's utilities, the folks that own the land want to be properly compensated for that land. Those have been some of the things that have cooled down potential developments in Newberry, and I'm sure Commissioner Glanzer could speak to that more than I can.
And then we got the okay to do the water line, but what about the sewer line, since we didn't get the funding from the state for that?
It's my estimates remain at $1.5 million. We'll either try again, which is what the Florida legislative representatives, our delegation, suggested that we do for next year. We wait on a big pockets development that'll come along, or the commission says, make it happen, and you know, and we'll figure out a financial plan as well, but make it happen. I would say, just so this commission's aware, now that the annexation for the Davis parcel's gone through, that we are having discussions with that property owner and an adjacent property owner about rezoning Corporate Park, trying to develop an agricultural business research park, 400-acre park, try to land IFAS as an anchor tenant, try to maybe get another corporate entity as an anchor tenant. A model for that would be called BioOhio, and it's associated with Ohio State University. Similar concept to what they've done. It's a similar concept to Progress Corporate Park, but it's ag-driven, not biomedical research-driven. So we're working, we're trying to get the University of Florida interested, we're trying to get Farm Bureau, we're trying to get those anchor tenants interested, generate some interest in a project like that. If we can get some interest in a project like that, I think that would make the sewer component, it would either give some certainty to the city to say that's our stake in this game. We'll make the sewer happen because a 400-acre research park is important to us, or we might get the right anchor tenant that says, for the cost of that sewer and what we're planning to get out of it, it's no big deal. We've got that, and we're going to make the sewer element happen. So those are some things that your staff, Brian, economic development, our Dallas is working on, Jamie's working on it from an infrastructure perspective, are trying to make happen over the summer and into the fall.
So people at the University of Florida, IFAS, I mean, they don't pay property taxes, do they?
They do not, and it would not be 400 acres worth of IFAS-owned property. Matter of fact, it would be IFAS as an anchor tenant would have a portion, and they would be exempt from property taxes, but they would still pay all the utilities. But for example, in Alachua's Progress Corporate Park, UF has 2 buildings there that are big buildings, and they are property tax exempt. But UF rents tons of research space from private laboratories that they need them that do pay property taxes. They moved into that same research park, Nanotherapeutics, $150 million. 150, right? $150 million worth of tangible assets and $1.2 million a year in utility consumption. Now, that park began developing in 1976. So it's 40 years into its life, so I don't expect overnight magic, if we have magic at all. I wouldn't be here to see all this. But somewhere, these parks that have had success, there's one down in the Vero Beach area, Fort Pierce area, that have had success. Someone started the ball rolling, pioneered it, this group, along with the right developers, got it going, and then sometime afterwards, 15 years, 25 years, the community begins to reap some benefits. And I would tell you that from a property tax perspective, the city of Alachua with a 280-acre corporate park benefits greatly with UF as an anchor tenant.
Yeah, we need something now.
We do. We do.
So I'm not so sure that what you're pursuing is the correct route to take.
Understood.
So just come up to the podium, state your name, and make your comments, and then we'll yell at you when you're
So I
done.
got to bring this down.
Mhm. Yep.
My name's Naeem. I just moved here a little less than a year ago. And just a couple of things real quick. I don't expect an answer right now, but this is just kind of directed towards the policing situation and our economic development. I do believe in fishing. My name's Naeem. It's spelled N-A-I-M, sorry. As far as money's concerned, we have to make money. We don't have a tax problem. We have a spending problem. And the spending problem, obviously, with a sheriff raising her pricing, meanwhile, she's getting cut left and right from the county. Well, if she's getting cut, how do you raise prices? That's just not fair. And if she's waiting to get a budget to give us our budget for policing, that's flat out wrong. I want to know if we're comparing our police services to other small cities that she's servicing. Are we doing a citizen, like citizen to our citizen comparison? So if she's charging for every citizen $1 in Waldorf, wherever it is she charging us the same thing? Or is she charging us $1.30 now? And why? Why that increase? Because there's no explanation of the increases. An actual line item by line item, someone needs to take the time to do this. Do we have somebody doing that? Or are we just letting her, here's your number, you could take it or leave it, and we're faced like how Jason said that citizens are up in arms saying, you know what, I don't need you, I have a gun at home.
And-
So, that's one. The other thing about the economic development, Joy being, in the business and whatnot, we're looking for this big thing from schools, whatever, but that's 25, like Farnsworth was saying, Monty. That's 25, 30 years from now. What's going on tomorrow? Is my son going to be able to live here tomorrow? I can care less right now for 25 years. We need to fix the problem that we're facing right now. So how hard is it to get a McDonald's right now? How hard is it to get a Burger King? How hard is it to get a Taco Bell? Whatever it is that's small, instead of a 10,000 square foot sports authority that went under, and they just finally rented it out right off of I-75, a prime location. We got a big box over there that just finally someone moved in. So if we offer a big box, how long are we going to sit with a big box? What are the small solutions for right now? Are we targeting CVS's? Are we targeting Walgreens? Are we targeting a Kangaroo? So I'm sorry, I'm just a concerned citizen. I still have an alarm service, so cops, if somebody breaks into my house, please, show up. That'd be nice. But by law, technically, you're supposed to still show up even if we don't pay, because we still are paying a county tax.
You're-
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Great points, and just to, you can sit down, I'll just reply to the commission. With regards to, and I don't mind interfacing, I'm just saying I didn't intend for you to just stand there. We've analyzed Sheriff Darnell's proposal and cost in excruciating detail. We have a model, we plug all this in, I believe that we know her numbers as they affect Newberry better than she does. So, and in terms of comparisons with other cities, we're the only city that contracts with her. Everybody else is either part of unincorporated Alachua County, they're in the MSTU. And so we can compare that, but it depends on the economics. If we compare it to Jonesville, what the residents of the Jonesville, if I draw a circle in Jonesville that has higher property values than Newberry, and we compare our cost to theirs, we'll be getting a real deal. And then if we compare our cost to an area of the county that has depressed property values compared to ours, it'll look like we're paying too much. So we've tried not to compare her offering to other communities in Alachua County because they're all based on property values. We do know what other communities are paying for law enforcement if it's self-provided. We know what other communities are paying through contracts for law enforcement services, and it's generally less than what we're paying. So we have a financial model that shows that the $740,000 that we're paying right now is fair. It's a good deal for the county, and last year when we inked that deal, we felt like that the alternative was to have our own police department at $1.4 million, $1.5 million, so it was about half of that, and we felt like it was a really good deal. So, but we said to her then, during negotiations, that we want to pay for law and services based on the value of the service that you're providing and not based upon the value of our property. And we made that statement, and so during our negotiations, the big question has been, the 856 number that she's thrown out as what next year's is based completely on what we would have paid in the MSTU and not based on what changed from year to year. So I continue to be optimistic. I continue to work on it, and we will see where it goes. We have the contract with her would terminate on September the 30th. We have the ability to have a 4-month extension, gets us through January potentially. We're aware of those deadlines, and we're working very hard to come up with a good solution for Newberryans. And with regards to economic development, I think that everything is always in play. I think it's foolish to look at tomorrow only and not pay attention to what's later down the road. I think it would be foolish to look at later down the road and not pay attention to tomorrow. But with regards to the McDonald's and the CVS's and the Publix's, they all want rooftops. And they all say that Newberry doesn't have enough rooftops. And when you say, well, what about High Springs? They have the same number of rooftops we have, and their answer is High Springs doesn't have a Jonesville right down the road that has all of those services. So Newberry, you've got to factor those in. So I know that that's the feedback we get. This commission has recognized aptly that rooftops aren't necessarily getting it for us. But I would say that if we put another 2,000 rooftops in Newberry in next year, that our ability to attract a CVS, a Walgreens, a McDonald's, a Publix, or any of those types of service industry is going to go up. Will it be healthy for us? I don't know the answer to that. We believe manufacturing is the way to go. Now we've looked at a feed mill who backed out through the economy changed. Their economy had changed. There was nothing that Newberry did. They acquired property, and then their economy changed, and so we're on an indefinite hold with them. If you speak to them, they will tell you, we want to be in Newberry. We love the reception we give them. We love everything about your community, but until our economics in terms of the feed industry goes, we're not budging. We've got a pump manufacturer that is committed, pretty darn committed to Newberry, but they've had it's a family-owned business, and they have family health problems, and so we've been working with them for a year, and you're just not generating that thing. But they'll come online a lot quicker. They're just a smaller employer. They're going to employ 8 to 10 employees. Okay, 12 to 14. So, without making tonight's presentation all about economic development, it is important to us in terms of how it plays into our revenues. I think that we put on, as a city, we put on 2 or 3 dog and pony shows a year where we invite elements of the development community, whether it's realtors or whether it's engineers or whether it's land use attorneys. Land use attorneys got in there because the gourmet rodent says that's how we came to Newberry. We were having problems in Alachua County, and our land use attorney who was helping us said, you should look at Newberry, and it gave us the idea, get in the phone book, get every land use attorney, have them come and see what a great place Newberry is, and maybe they'll tell another client. I mean, that's just a portion of the things that Brian is doing with economic development and the economic development committee. I think if you attend their meetings, you'd be surprised at the level of depth that they go into in terms of figuring things out. But and having said that, I'd say anybody that stumbles across that golden nugget that they can throw our way, we will pursue all leads. There are no leads that we will not pursue. One of our commissioners suggested to me the other day that we pursue warehousing and showcasing for contractors because there was so much construction going on the west side of town, and we followed up on that within 2 days. And so those are good ideas. It was very specific, and so we specifically reached out to the Builders Association of North Central Florida to see if there was any type of interest, and nothing yet, but who knows, maybe we will generate some interest.
Very good. Sounds like a good, comfortable pause till our next meeting, which is the 28th. Do we have a time on that?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay. Without further comment, we will adjourn.